The interview of far right leader Tommy Robinson has left many questions unanswered. This is a response to his interview, which was conducted by two immigrants from Russian and Venezuelan background, Konstantin and Francis Foster. Uh, At the outset, I would say I really feel sorry to whatever happened to his cousin, and it's very unfortunate. No criminal should be defended on any ground at all. Um, and a criminal should be condemned without regard to his religion, caste, color, or creed. So let's talk about some important issue. Many might share his concern about Islamic extremist, and no man with a modicum of common sense would throw support behind these forces of obscurantism and fanaticism. But the point that Tommy Robinson missed, and I'm surprised that people like Constantine did not uh, ask any question about it. It's true that there is this phenomenon of Islamic extremism in several parts of the world, including Western countries. But when people talk about it, they do not want to trace the causes. They do not want to talk about the leaders who threw blanket support behind these fanatical elements in Afghanistan. And Tommy Robinson might be justified in coming hard on these Islamic extremists. He's justified in criticizing them, and people could raise question to their hegemonic ideology opposing it. And every man with a modicum of political consciousness should oppose this political hegemony. But when he talks about these Islamic extremists and Islamic extremism, he does not want to uh, discuss in detail the type of support that these militants or Islamic extremists got from the Western world, especially from Reagan government. And in the UK, of course, many critics might argue that Margaret Thatcher also threw support behind these fanatical elements. And I'm not sure who is the political ideal of Tommy Robinson, but some of his tweets or his statements create an impression that he liked uh, Margaret Thatcher when she was alive, or he still likes her. So many critics might argue that she was the one who supported them. And of course, Reagan received these extremist forces at the White House, the United States, its CIA, through support behind them. Some of the Afghan Mujahideen leaders, or at least one leader, was accused of attempting to throw acid towards the face of a woman who was not fully covered, or who did not uh, cover her face with a veil, who was not veiled. So people need to know what type of uh, fanatical elements were supported in Afghanistan, and the jihad in Afghanistan greatly transformed not only Muslim world and Muslim societies, but it also affected many parts of the world. There are American officials clearly saying that we supported Afghan Mujahideen. One of the senior American officials was interviewed by a French newspaper during the decade of 90s, and he went to the extent of revealing that America had started imparting training or giving training to Afghan militants 6 months prior to Soviet invasion. And he was trying to imply that we wanted to create an impression that the US was trying to do something in Afghanistan so that it could force the Soviet Union to send its troops in to Afghanistan, and the US could settle the scores of the Vietnam, or could revenge, or could take revenge for its defeat in the Vietnam. So it was very clear that the United States and West supported them. What Tommy Robinson perhaps does not know, I believe that Constantine would have known, but he did not ask any questions. So since he was his parents were from the Soviet Union, so and he seems to be a well-read person, so he must know that what type of support was thrown by the Western world towards these brigands. So there are videos, even on YouTube, where you could see Reagan receiving these fanatical elements at White House. There are videos of Margaret Thatcher meeting Afghan refugees in Peshawar in Pakistan. So they greatly transformed. So these fanatical elements not only created problem for Western world but for Muslim societies as well. For instance, in Pakistan, you did not have Kalashnikov culture. You did not have addicted to heroin. Hardly there was one addicted or no addicted at all in 1977. And when Afghan crusade uh, started in 1979, now Pakistan, Iran, and many Muslim countries have millions of addicted. Similarly, Kalashnikov culture, sectarianism, Islamic terrorism, many Muslim societies were quite liberal and secular in their outlook, with women enjoying freedom to some extent, but after the Afghan jihad, they were curtailed. But it was not only Afghan jihad when the West threw support behind fanatical elements. If you look at the West supported conservative elements of society in many Muslim countries. For instance, in Iran, today Tommy Robinson and other far right wingers, other leaders of far right might lambast Iran a lot or Ayatollahs a lot. But what they do not know, or what they do not want to mention, is that during the decade of 1950s, or more precisely in 1953, there was a democratic government which was nationalist, secular in its outlook, which wanted tolerance for society, which wanted women education as well. This government was led by Dr. Mossadegh. He nationalized Anglo-Iranian oil company, and then the American CIA and the British agencies, they collaborated and they staged a coup there. And you know who was used against Mossadegh? Ayatollah Kashani. And who was Ayatollah Kashani? He is said to be one of the ideological mentors of Ayatollah Khomeini, whose ghost is still ruling over the theocratic state of Iran. So Ayatollah Kashani was considered, was considered a conservative mullah, and Ayatollah Khomeini and these mullahs, they put a lot of curbs on women rights, on minorities' rights. So he was supported there, and it was not the end of the story. They supported Mastoumi, again an Islamist party in Indonesia, with conservative ideas. And if you see Sharia law in some of the regions of Indonesia, it was because of this ideology and so many other factors. Ikhwanul Muslimin, it's considered the godfather of all jihadi political parties. So Maulana Qutb and other, when the British colonized Egypt. And why did this support? Because in Iran, their main target was Mossadegh, who was a nationalist, who was secular, who wanted to do something for his people, who wanted to give a modicum of freedom to women. And they allied with Ayatollah Kashani. In Indonesia, Soekarno was comparatively, I would not say secular, but he was a moderate Muslim who wanted secularism in his country in one way or another way, who wanted women education, who wanted women to take part in political life. In the same way, you could also see Jamal Abdul Nasir or Kamal Abdul Nasir. You may have so many differences, but Jamal Abdul Nasir definitely did not want women to be outside of schools or colleges or public life or political life. But on the other hand, Ikhwanul Muslimin, who were very rigid towards women, who wanted a Sharia government, who wanted imposition of Sharia, they were supported by whom? By Western countries, Ikhwanul Muslimin. And it was Ikhwanul Muslimin that, in a way, influenced, the future leaders of Al Qaeda, the future leaders of many terrorist group, allegedly. And then it was, so in Iran you have Ayatollah Kashani. In Indonesia you had Masjumi party, which was an Islamic party supported by the West. In Afghanistan you had Hizb Islami and other Islamic parties that were supported by. In fact, one of the guy who supported, reportedly, the largest chunk of American aid was Gulbuddin Hikmatyar. And Gulbuddin Hikmatyar was the leader of Hizb Islami. He was, from fanatical group of Afghanistan, and most of the Afghan Mujahideen, they were extremely conservative. Now, Tommy Robinson and Konstantin would not discuss why they opposed the socialist government that was there. You may have so many differences with that socialist government that came into power towards the end of 1980s. But what they did, they encouraged women education, establishing more than 22 higher educational institutions. They banned child marriage in certain parts of Afghanistan. Girls as old as 13 or 12 or even younger would be married off. And this government that came into power through a revolutionary activity that banned it. They tried to carry out land reforms. 7% tribal lords in Afghanistan, according to some research, were holding more than 67% land, arable land, or in some cases 87%, according to some other statistics. So they trying to carry out. There are still pictures of Afghanistan. There are still videos. There are reports that you can Google and you can see on YouTube and see the Afghanistan before 1979, when the West started this so-called jihad, started supporting these militants. Even during colonial time, if you look at two biggest seminaries who prepared millions of obscurantists and fanatical elements, they are known as Darul Uloom Deoband, or Religious Seminary of Deoband. Deoband is a place in Uttar Pradesh, and there was one Barelvi religious seminaries and so many other seminaries. They were all established during colonial times, and many of the mullah who graduated from there, they were the sort of loyal, loyal servant of the British Empire. Of course, there were some exceptions. Some mullah also revolted against the British Empire, and they waged a struggle against it. So some people might say, oh, this is all history. Now look at, many human rights defender might say that Saudi Arabia had been for a long time a graveyard of human rights. The same could be said about UAE. Many critics might say the same could be said about Qatar and other countries. But who had been supporting? Even today, when you say that Qatar is supporting extremists, where is one of the biggest military presence of the United States in the world? In Qatar. So it was not only the policies of the Western world that supported these fanatical elements, these extremist elements in Afghanistan, but I have discussed that they were supported in Egypt, in Iran, in Indonesia, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan, in several parts of the world. And then, because of Afghan jihad, you had fanatical elements like Osama bin Laden and his brigade of terrorists. You had Islamic State, that is also a result of the same Afghan jihad. On the one hand, the West was throwing support behind these fanatical elements. On the other hand, they were close friends of the countries who were considered, or whose leaders or whose ruling elites were considered extremists. For instance, the United Kingdom has had two biggest trade deals in its history, and both of them were struck, with Saudi Arabia, Al Yamama deal and Eurojet deal. And if Margaret Thatcher is the icon of Tommy Robinson, or if he likes her, so I would like to inform him that the first deal was struck during her time. Al-Yamama deal. And the second deal, of course, was struck during the time of Tony Blair. In the same way, the United States has one of the biggest trade deals in its history, or rather, two deals, one during the time of Obama, another during the time of Trump, and both were with Saudi Arabia. But you are not people like Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, and Goodwin. They would not criticize that. If you have a problem, then why not lodge a big protest against them? They are supporting because they are a commercial interest, and when it comes to capitalistic interest, Tommy Robinson and other people will take a back seat. It was not only in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Indonesia. People might say, oh, this is all history. What about in the recent decades? In Syria, uh, there were elements, extremist elements, who were fighting against Bashar al Assad. But for the Western world, Bashar al Assad was the greatest monster. For them, he was the biggest problem. So he turned a blind eye as hordes of extremists flying from different parts of Europe and Western world, landing into Turkey and going into Syria and fighting, violating the sovereignty of a sovereign country. And they were throwing, it can't be said that they were throwing support, but at least they were turning a blind eye. Why? Because uh, for them, Bashar was the greater evil. In the same way, like in Afghanistan, for them, it was the socialist government there that was a greater evil as compared to militants or Islamic extremists who were waging a fight against the evil Soviet Empire. So it was the West that threw support, and naturally it had to face the consequences. So in Syria, they supported, and now somebody said, no, they did not. Now, the terrorist of the past, Ahmad Shara Jolani, he was the member, reportedly, he was the member of Al Qaeda. He collaborated with Abu Musab Zarqawi in Iraq, who was a terrorist and butcher of several Iraqi areas. He was from Islamic State. Then he also remained affiliated with other Syrian fanatical group. And today, Donald Trump, who is the icon of Tommy Robinson, is shaking hand with him. Western world is now dying to shake hand with this ex-terrorist. They have, in a way, moderated him. Now they are heaping eulogies on that terrorist. And Donald Trump, who is the icon of Tommy Robinson and all far-right terrorists who talk about Islamic terrorism, not a single tweet would you find against Donald Trump slamming or criticizing his policy towards Syria. Now they are trying to hobnob with the terrorists, and his section of his ruling alliance is coming hard on minorities, is coming hard on Druze, is coming hard on Christian, is trying to create problem for women in Syria. And then again, if you look at Chechen terrorists, when they were fighting against Russia, whose blessing did they have? The Western world did not condemn it. Of course, there were some statement, lip service. Imagine if Chechen terrorists rise against, in parts of Russia. Imagine if there are terrorists or Islamic terrorists, uh, rising against China in Western province of China. Where do you think the support of the Western world would be? So this is an important question. So I would continue commenting on it because in the past, Tommy Robinson has allegedly made tall claims, which many people take with a pinch of salt. Some of them did not turn out to be correct. So I will discuss it in part two as well.